the storm didn't start with thunder. It started with breathing, mine, ragged and too loud in a forest that wanted me quiet. Branches whipped across my arms as I ran, turning pine needles into claws. Rain came in hard sheets that stitched the night together until the world was only black and silver in the drum of my heart. I kept one arm clamped across my chest, fingers digging into the leather pouch strapped there like a second rib. The letter inside was already damp, the ink probably bleeding into bruised words. I didn't dare check. I wasn't running from the weather. I was running from eyes. They moved between the trees without sound, too low and too fast to be men, too wrong to be wolves. The elders used to call them nightborn when they wanted children to behave. They'd lean close to a hearth's last coal and whisper, "Shadow eats what is not claimed." I never believed in Shadow. Then Shadow learned my name. The ache under my sternum flared hot, a familiar, hated pulse, as if something caged inside my ribs was testing the bars. I pressed harder. Heat pushed back. A faint shimmer trickled down my forearms, the suggestion of light beneath skin. "Not now," I hissed, breath shredding. A slick root caught my heel. I pitched forward, palms skidding through mud, stones biting into flesh. The pouch slammed my ribs and stole the breath I had left. For a heartbeat I lay there, cheek in cold muck, rain needling my scalp, wanting the earth to swallow me whole. The forest said no. The forest was never merciful. I crawled, then found my knees, then my feet. The ground sloped and kept sloping until the trees tore open and the sound arrived, roaring, endless, full of black teeth. The river didn't ask. It took. Cold folded over my head with a weight that made the world narrow to burning lungs and blind hands. The current spun me, shoved me, laughed against my teeth. A rock kissed my shin hard enough to explode stars behind my eyes. I kicked anyway, found nothing, kicked again, and finally broke the surface into rain that felt like knives and air that hurt worse than drowning. I coughed until my throat tasted of iron and riverbed. The bank rushed past, dark smears of root and grass. I clawed for anything and caught a branch slick with moss. The water tried to bargain. I didn't listen. I dragged myself onto mud that didn't want me and sprawled there, ribs heaving, hair plastered across my mouth. The world swam. I let it. Then the heat came back. It started low, a brand pressed from the inside, then spread outward in bright threads that chased each other beneath my skin. The storm quieted around me for a strangled second, as if the rain itself paused to watch. Silver ghosted along my collarbone, down my wrists. I curled over it, hands on my chest, breath breaking. "Not now," I said again. A prayer or a threat? I couldn't tell. A howl split the trees behind me, long and thin and too hungry. So I stood, because fear is a better drug than mercy, and I ran again. By the time the ground lifted toward the high pines, my ankle had gone numb, and I could feel the letter's edges through the wet leather. One fold, two creases, the corner I'd worried between fingers on a day that wasn't raining. I told myself the words mattered, that if I got them into the right hands, everything would tilt back toward possible. Lies are lighter than truth when you need to carry them a long way. The canopy thickened until the storm became a hiss. I stumbled into a clearing ringed by stones blackened long ago. Someone had once made fire here and left the memory of it behind. I sank beside the largest rock and tried to become small. Footsteps came instead. Heavy, controlled. Not the scramble of beasts. A rhythm that could have been a counting or a promise. I looked up into a face that the night liked. The rain made a clean line off his jaw. It didn't dare stay. His eyes found mine like they'd been looking for only me and were tired of being polite about it. He crouched without speaking, and in the fireless dark, I felt the heat of him like an argument. "Don't," I rasped, scrambling backward until stone pressed my spine. "Stay away." He tilted his head as if listening to a sound I couldn't hear, and then his gaze dropped to my hands. I followed it and swore. The faint silver was still there, rippling under skin with each panicked beat of my heart. He reached for my arm. I jerked away. He didn't touch me. He touched the ground beside me, knuckles grazing wet dirt like he was reminding the earth he belonged here. "Lyra," he said. It wasn't a question. Every muscle in me locked. The last pack that had spoken my name had done it with a rope in one hand and salt in the other. "How?" The word snapped off. He looked over my shoulder. I heard it then. The brush of bodies in the trees, a dozen small sounds that added up to hunger. When he rose, it was too smooth for human. He stepped past me, placing his body between mine and the dark. The posture wasn't courtly. It was old. The first Nightborn slid from the tree line on two long legs, its eyes the wrong color of gold. It tested the air, head tilting in a series of sharp angles, the way broken things move when they still remember grace. It didn't look at him. It looked at me. He moved before it did. I've seen men fight. I've seen wolves fight. I've never seen someone edit motion the way he did, cutting a lunge into two pieces and throwing both back like a challenge. There was no wasted breath, no sound that wasn't necessary. He struck the creature once, a sound like wet bark breaking, and it folded around the impact. Another came from the left. He turned, caught, drove it into the mud with a force that gently shook older stones than either of us would ever be. The rest hesitated. Beasts don't fear. The things they become when old magic rots them do. It should have been enough to watch, to let the stranger keep doing the impossible while I stayed very, very small. But the heat in my chest woke like an eye-opening. Light gathered at my wrists, brighter now, threads knotting into cords that pulsed toward my hands. I grabbed my forearms and squeezed hard enough to leave crescent moons. "No," I said to the thing that had cost me a home, to the power that made elders spit when I passed, to the memory of a boy screaming while silver turned his skin to a memory of fire. A third Nightborn broke rank, a lazy, cruel arc that ended with its blade of a forelimb already lifted toward my throat. I didn't scream. He was simply there, too fast to understand, catching the strike with his body like it belonged to him. Metal or bone made to pretend, bit into his side and came away red. He didn't flinch. He tore the weapon free and turned it into a suggestion the ground accepted. "Run," he said without looking back. The word touched a place in me that only wanted to obey. My legs didn't move. Not because I couldn't. Because the letter against my heart was a stone, and the prophecy I'd never wanted was a chain in the clearing. This ordinary ring of old fire had begun to hum. I felt it beneath my palms when I steadied myself on the largest stone. A pulse slow as old trees and deep as buried water. Lines I hadn't noticed in the rock. Scratches, I'd thought. Lit from within, a thin gold brightening to white. The illumination moved like breath across the circle, finding similar marks on other stones, waking a pattern I didn't know how to read but understood anyway. The Nightborn stilled. Even the rain seemed to lean closer. He turned then, eyes no longer strange or dark, but something else, like animals when moonlight finds them. He took me in with one quick scan, my hands on the stone, the silver bleeding through my skin, the circle waking. "Don't," I whispered, though I didn't know which of us I was asking. His gaze flicked to my chest, to the pouch, as if he could see the letter through leather and rain. Then it lifted to my face, held there, and something I didn't have a word for settled between my ribs and the heat that wanted out. "Stand," he said. "If you kneel to it, it will own you." I didn't choose it. Choose now. It was an unfair thing to ask of a girl who had been cut out of her pack registry with a knife. The stone warmed under my hands. Not fire-warm, truth-warm. The white along its grooves gathered, itself into words not carved by a chisel, but by the idea of one. Child of flame, breakers become makers when they stop, burning only themselves. It wasn't the elders' language. It wasn't any language I knew, and yet I knew it. The knowledge lived in marrow, old as fear. The Nightborn moved again. The clearing, in answer, thrummed once like a low bell. He shifted his stance, the line of his shoulders telling the creatures a story about regret they did not understand, and violence they would. "Lyra." His voice landed like a hand on a door I'd nailed shut. "I can hold them for a time. Decide if I hold them for nothing." I wanted to spit what the council had taught me, that cursed things can't decide, only end. But my mouth wouldn't form their words anymore. The heat beneath my sternum rose, not as a plea now, more like a standing. "I don't know how," I said, and it was salt raw. He glanced at my hands. "You do. You've just only ever chosen not to." Behind him shadows gathered. Teeth flashed. He breathed in once, slow, steadying the world with the most patient violence I had ever seen. I lifted my palms from the stone, the silver that had haunted me since. The night the elders pushed me out stepped into my hands like it had been waiting for manners. It wasn't a blaze. It was a held thing, a bright thread I could pinch between forefinger and thumb and not be devoured by. I turned my wrists and watched it obey. The clearing exhaled. The Nightborn came. He met the first with bone and will, dragging it aside, opening a space that wasn't there a heartbeat before. I stepped into it. Light braided between my fingers, thin and sharp as a promise. When I cut the air, the silver thread sang, quiet, clean, and the creature reeled as if something it remembered from a truer life had struck it. Not burned. Named, I did it again, and again. Small movements, deliberate, choosing each time. When the last of them loped back into the trees with a sound like broken glass learning to be a voice, silence flooded the clearing so fast my ears rang. He stood opposite me, chest rising and falling, not with struggle but with a measured recovery. Blood darkened his side. He glanced down at it like the fact belonged to someone else, and then back at me. The circle's lines dimmed to a steady glow, as if satisfied we'd understood the first word of a very long sentence. "How do you know my name?" I asked, because courage will answer if you ask it often enough in a single night. He didn't come closer, but the space between us felt smaller, as if the storm had decided to keep our secrets. "I've been listening," he said, soft and not soft at once. "To the forest, to the things the forest chose not to kill." A laugh tried to be born in my throat and came out a cough. I wiped my mouth with the back of my hand and tasted copper and riverbed and the end of one kind of life. "Who are you?" I asked. A horn sounded, low, old, carrying judgment in its belly. The sound rolled across the pines and shook ash out of memories I'd buried. He didn't look away from me when he answered. "Caelan," he said, "and if you walk out of this clearing with me, Lyra, the next choice will not be between running and drowning. It will be between truth and the people who fear it." The horn called again, closer. I looked at his blood. I looked at my hands. Silver still stitched my skin like constellations that had chosen new sky. The circle's warmth pressed into my spine. The letter against my heart lay quiet and heavy, a promise I might still keep. "Truth has never fed me," I said. "No," he agreed, "but it's the only thing that stops you from being eaten." I closed my fingers. The light obeyed and went thin as breath. "Fine," I said, hating how much of me meant it. Lead, he did not smile. He only turned toward the dark, toward the horn, toward whatever chose to stand in front of us next. And I followed, not because I trusted him, not yet, but because the clearing had woken something I couldn't bury again. Behind us, the stones dimmed to their old faces. Ahead, the forest leaned in to listen. The forest had grown quiet, too quiet. Every step we took sank into mud still steaming from the rain. The storm had wandered off somewhere, leaving behind a silence that didn't feel like peace. It felt like something listening. The man who called himself Caelan moved ahead of me, his stride steady, his shoulders carrying a kind of calm that didn't belong to anyone human. He hadn't looked back since we left the glowing stones, but I could feel it, the weight of his awareness, the way his senses brushed against the world like invisible threads stretched between us. I followed because there was nowhere else left to go, because running had always been easier than thinking, and because the only thing worse than the forest was the sound of being alone in it. The ache in my ribs throbbed with each breath, a dull reminder of the river and the Nightborn's claws. My ankle burned, my palms were torn, and the pouch across my chest felt heavier than it ever had before. Inside was the letter, my last attempt at forgiveness, already smeared, already ruined. I wondered if he could smell it, the ink, the fear, the history clinging to my skin. "Where are we going?" I finally asked, my voice rough from too much silence. "High ground," he said without turning. The storm called others. "They'll hunt by scent until dawn." I almost laughed, because his calm terrified me more than their howls ever had. He spoke of monsters like a man who had already been one. The trees thinned. Ahead, the slope climbed into a ridge of rock that tore through the canopy like a blade. Caelan's pace didn't falter, even when the earth grew slick. He moved like someone born from the wild itself, precise, deliberate, unbothered by the weight of the night. I tried to match his rhythm. Failed. My foot slipped on wet stone, and before I could fall, his hand caught my arm, firm, warm, alive. For a moment, I forgot about the mud or the rain or the fear. The heat of his grip burned through the cold in my bones. He steadied me easily, his thumb brushing the inside of my wrist, where the faint silver light still pulsed under my skin. I yanked my arm back as if burned. "Don't," I whispered. His eyes lifted, dark and unreadable. "Don't what?" "Touch me like you know me." He didn't argue, just looked at me with that same infuriating calm, then turned away. The space he left behind was colder than the rain had ever been. We reached the ridge before dawn. The world stretched beneath us, endless forest, slick rivers, mist curling like ghosts over the valleys. Caelan crouched beside a broken stone marker, brushing away moss until faint symbols appeared beneath his fingers. I recognized them, the same kind that had burned in the clearing. "What is this place?" I asked. "Old ground," he said. "Before the packs. Before they built their wars and forgot who they were." He looked at me then. Truly looked. And the way his gaze caught the thin light of dawn made me feel like the forest was holding its breath. "You've been here before, haven't you?" he asked quietly. "No." I lied without thinking. He didn't believe me. I could see it in the corner of his mouth, the almost smile that wasn't kindness. It was knowledge. The sun crept higher, weak and pale. I wrapped my arms around myself, trying to shake off the chill that had nothing to do with weather. The silver fire inside me still hummed, quiet but constant, like a heart that didn't belong entirely to me. "Why did you save me?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. His eyes stayed fixed on the valley below, watching the mist shift and curl. When he finally spoke, it was barely more than a murmur. "Because I remember what it means to burn alone." The words hit harder than they should have. I looked away, afraid he might see the truth in my face, that I knew exactly what he meant. He rose and moved to the edge of the ridge. The wind tugged at his hair, carrying the scent of pine and blood. "They'll find us again," he said. "When they do, you'll have to choose which part of you to trust, the fire or the fear." I don't trust either. Then learn to. He turned and started down the far side of the ridge, not waiting for my reply. For a moment, I stayed where I was. The forest stretched out before me like an endless sentence, and I was the word no one knew how to finish. Somewhere in the trees below, I could hear faint echoes, not howls this time, but horns. Low, old, familiar, the kind the council used when judgment was about to begin. My stomach twisted. I looked at Caelan, already a shadow among shadows. Then at the sky, pale and bruised with the last color of night, and finally, at the pouch against my chest. The letter inside was soaked, the ink bleeding into oblivion. Whatever words I'd written were gone, but the truth I'd been running from wasn't. I took one last breath of the mountain air, heavy with rain and memory, and followed him into the dawn, the stranger who knew my name, and the storm that would not end until I learned why. By the time the sun finally rose, the forest had changed. Not in color, but in silence. It wasn't the peace that comes after a storm. It was the kind that feels borrowed, stolen, held too tight by something that doesn't intend to keep it for long. The air was thick, alive with tension. The kind that makes the skin crawl before the danger even shows its face. We moved through it in silence, Caelan ahead, me a few paces behind, my boots sinking into the soft mud left by the night's rain. The trees grew taller here, their trunks wide enough to swallow houses. Moss hung like funeral cloth, dripping in slow drops that caught the morning light. Every sound, the crack of a twig, the whisper of wind, felt amplified, as if the forest itself was listening to us, judging every step. He hadn't spoken since the ridge. Neither had I, because every time I opened my mouth, I thought of the horns I'd heard before dawn, the same horns that once called for my exile, and though I didn't tell him, I knew what they meant. The council had found me. We stopped when the path narrowed into a gully between two massive rocks. He lifted a hand, wordless, commanding stillness. I froze, breath caught halfway in my chest. The forest had gone too still again. No wind, no birds, no water trickling anywhere. Only the faint hum beneath the earth, like something ancient breathing through stone. Then came the smell, Iron. Smoke. Caelan's jaw tightened. His hand drifted toward the knife at his hip. "They're here," he murmured. "Who?" I whispered. He looked over his shoulder, eyes like shards of obsidian. "You're past." Before I could ask what he meant, movement broke through the fog. Shapes formed between the trees, tall, cloaked, deliberate. The council's warriors. Their scent hit me next. Pine, ash, and the faint, unmistakable trace of silver dust. A weapon against things like me, I should have run, but running is a luxury for the innocent. When they stepped fully into view, the old fear slammed into me like an open hand. There were 7 of them, the council's hunters, chosen for their discipline, not mercy. Their armor gleamed faintly under the weak light, each bearing the mark of the crescent fang, the symbol of the ruling pack. And at their center stood her, Elder Neria, the one who had spoken the decree against me 3 years ago. Her hair, once black, was now streaked with white. Her eyes hadn't softened. If anything, they'd grown sharper, colder, like frost that learned how to wound. When her gaze found me, I felt 14 again, barefoot and shaking, the silver fire spilling through my fingers while the pack screamed monster. "So," she said, her voice cutting through the damp air, "the cursed child returns." My throat locked. My palms burned where they pressed against the pouch on my chest. Caelan didn't move. His hand rested lightly on his blade, but his body language said something else. Not threat, not surrender. Watchfulness. "She is under my protection," he said quietly. Neria's eyes flicked to him. "Your protection?" Her tone was ice-laced contempt. "And who are you to make claims on what the flame has already forsaken?" He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The way her face changed, the faint crack in her composure, told me she recognized him. "Caelan of the Wraith-Line," she said softly. So the rumors were true. "The fallen Alpha still walks." Her words sent a murmur through the warriors behind her. I didn't understand what she meant. Not yet. But the way Caelan's jaw set told me the name she spoke was a wound he hadn't healed. Neria turned her gaze back to me. "You were warned never to return to these woods. Lyra of the Fire Vein, you defied exile, called the storm, and now you bring ruin to another Alpha's land." "I didn't call the storm," I said, my voice trembling but stubborn. "It followed me." "Lies," one of the warriors hissed. "The flame doesn't follow. It obeys its master. I never wanted it." The words ripped out of me before I could stop them. "Do you think I asked to be cursed? To be feared? To survive when you should have burned?" Neria interrupted. Silence fell again. Even the trees seemed to draw back. Caelan took a slow step forward. "You forget yourself, Elder. The girl saved your lands last night. Those Nightborn were hunting through the valley. They would have reached your border by dawn if she hadn't stopped them." Neria's gaze cut to him sharply. "Stopped them? Or summoned them?" "She fought beside me." "She burned beside you," Neria snapped, her voice echoing against the rocks. "The same flame that scorched our kin now lights your path, and you call that salvation?" Her accusation struck harder than any blow. My hands shook. I wanted to scream that she was wrong, that I hadn't meant to destroy anyone, not then, not ever. But my throat wouldn't move. The words caught on years of guilt and grief that had hardened into silence. Caelan's voice dropped, low and dangerous. "If your council still judges power by fear, then your kind will fall long before her curse ever reaches you." Neria stepped closer. and for a heartbeat their eyes locked. Predator against predator, neither willing to blink first. "You would defy the council for her?" she asked. He didn't speak. He simply moved, positioning himself half in front of me. The message was answer enough. Her lips curled. "Then you're both doomed." She raised a hand, and the warriors tightened their circle, silver blades catching what little light the morning had to give. "Take them." The first warrior lunged. Caelan moved faster. Steel met steel, silver sparked, and the clearing erupted into chaos. I stumbled back, nearly losing my footing as the first clash of metal rang through the trees. Caelan fought like the storm itself, fluid, relentless. A rhythm that turned violence into art. Every strike found its place. Every dodge left the next enemy off balance. But there were too many. I felt the familiar heat start to build again, crawling under my skin, begging to be unleashed. My pulse raced, part fear, part memory. I had promised myself never to use it again. Not after what it had done. But when I saw the blade slice across Caelan's shoulder, saw him stagger under the weight of another strike, something inside me snapped. The silver fire burst through my palms before I could stop it. It didn't roar this time. It sang, a low thrumming note that shivered through the clearing. Every warrior froze, their blades reflecting the sudden glow that turned the fog into molten light. Neria's eyes widened. "No." The fire spread outward, coiling around me like threads of living light. I didn't command it. It chose me. The world blurred. The air smelled of ozone and old blood. The ground trembled beneath my feet. I heard the whispers again. The same ones from the grove, from the stones that had lit under my touch. Ancient voices, soft and cruel, chanting a truth I didn't want to know. Child of flame, child of choice. The silver pulse reached the trees, racing through the branches until every leaf glowed faintly, every trunk shimmered like glass. The council's warriors stepped back, shielding their faces. Neria alone stood firm, though fear flickered in her eyes. "Stop it," she shouted. "Do you know what you're doing?" "No," I said, my voice shaking with something that wasn't fear anymore. "But I'm done pretending I don't." Caelan turned toward me then, wounded, breathless, eyes blazing with something between pride and dread. "Lyra," whatever he meant to say drowned in the light. The fire erupted skyward, a column of pure silver that tore through the canopy and split the clouds. For a moment, dawn burned brighter than day, and every shadow in the forest bowed low. When the glow finally faded, the ground was scorched but still alive. The trees stood blackened but unbroken, and every warrior who had lifted a weapon against us now lay scattered, unconscious but breathing. Neria staggered, clutching her staff for balance, her face pale with disbelief. You spared them." I looked at my hands, trembling, still lined with faint light. I didn't want death. I wanted silence. Caelan stepped closer, slow and careful, as though approaching something sacred. "You controlled it," he said softly. I met his gaze, heart hammering. "No, it controlled me, but it listened." He nodded once. "That's more than most can say about their monsters." Behind us, the last of the silver faded into mist. Neria stared at me for a long time before lowering her head slightly. Not in respect, not quite, but in recognition. "The prophecy wasn't wrong," she murmured. "The flame may yet choose." Then she turned to her wounded warriors and gestured for retreat. "This isn't over, Lyra. The council will not forgive this, but perhaps the forest already has." When they disappeared into the fog, only silence remained. Caelan sank to one knee, pressing a hand against his bleeding shoulder. I knelt beside him, tearing a strip from my cloak to bind the wound. The fire had left me drained, every muscle trembling, every thought scattered. But somewhere deep inside, a fragile calm flickered. "Why do they fear me so much?" I whispered. He looked at me, his voice barely more than breath. "Because power like yours doesn't ask for permission." The forest sighed, and somewhere far beyond the mist, thunder rolled again. Not from a storm, from something older. Something waking. I didn't know it yet, but the night's battle had only been the beginning. The fire within me had stopped running. Now it was learning to speak. We walked until the forest changed its voice. By dusk, the trees had grown older, their roots thicker, their silence heavier. Mist clung to the ground like breath that refused to fade. Every step crunched over fallen needles and damp stone. Caelan's wound had stopped bleeding, but the scent of iron still lingered in the air, sharp and cold. Neither of us spoke for hours. Words felt dangerous, like light in a cave that hadn't seen it in years. The fire inside me was quiet now, sleeping just beneath the surface, a patient thing waiting to be called again. My hands still bore faint threads of silver, like veins that didn't belong to my body anymore. Every pulse felt like a whisper from something ancient, something that wanted to remind me that I was no longer just a girl running through storms. When I finally broke the silence, my voice came out hoarse. "They'll come again, won't they?" Caelan didn't slow. "They always do. Then why aren't we running?" He glanced back once, eyes catching the dim glow of twilight. "Because I'm done running too." There was no arrogance in his tone, just quiet certainty, the kind that made me hate him a little. Because certainty was a luxury I'd never been allowed to have. We reached a clearing as night fell. At its center, hidden beneath hanging vines, rose a ruin. Stone arches half swallowed by moss, steps carved with faded sigils, and walls split by roots thick as a man's torso. The air shimmered faintly, like heat without warmth. Caelan stopped at the base of the stairs. "Here," he said. I frowned. "What is this place?" "An old temple, built before the Pax learned to fear their gods." The words made something shift inside me. The carvings on the stone seemed familiar, like echoes of the glowing symbols from the grove. The same spirals, the same crescents, as if the earth itself had been trying to tell the same story in different languages for centuries. Caelan lit a small flame from a shard of flint and dry moss. The firelight painted the ruined chamber in shades of gold and shadow. I could finally see him properly, the blood drying on his shoulder, the dark veins of exhaustion running beneath his eyes, the way his breath came heavy but even. He sank against the wall, head tipped back, gaze fixed on the cracked ceiling. "This was once a sanctuary for those like you," he said. "Those born with fire in their veins." I froze. "Like me?" he nodded. "Before the council called it a curse, it was called a gift. The Flameborn were guardians, protectors of balance between the spirit and the wild, until fear rewrote history." I stared at him, my pulse hammering. "How do you know that?" He hesitated, and in the pause, I felt the weight of his silence, heavy, deliberate. "Because I watched them burn," he said finally. The words landed like stones in a well. I waited for him to continue, afraid to breathe too loudly. "My line was sworn to protect the Flameborn," he went on, voice low, distant. "Before the wars, before the packs turned on each other. But power breeds envy. The council feared what they couldn't control. They slaughtered the Flameborn and those who defended them. I stared, the truth twisting through me like a blade. Your pack was erased, he finished, along with its name. They call us the Wraith-Line now, ghosts that never learn to die. His eyes flicked to me, dark and gleaming. You carry the same fire they tried to extinguish. I sank to my knees across from him, my heart beat loud in the quiet. Then why save me? Why not let the curse end with me? Because it's not a curse, he said, and for the first time his voice broke. It's what's left of the world's memory, burning inside the last person who hasn't forgotten how to feel it. The silence that followed was almost sacred. Only the fire between us moved, its light tracing the scars across his skin, old, jagged, cruel. I realized then how many battles he'd carried alone. He looked up suddenly, as if feeling my gaze. You think I don't see it, Lyra? The way you hold your hands when the fire rises, not in fear but in grief. You think you're terrified of what you are, but you're terrified of what it will cost you to accept it. My throat tightened. It's already cost me everything. Not yet, he said. Not while you still breathe. I wanted to look away, but his eyes wouldn't let me. They were too steady, too dark, too full of understanding I didn't want. A gust of wind slipped through the broken arches, scattering ashes into the firelight. The embers danced, and for a heartbeat I thought I saw faces in the smoke. Eyes like mine, glowing silver, voices whispering through time. Do you hear them? I whispered. He nodded. The old ones. The fire remembers its children. The warmth spread again, starting from my chest, curling up my throat like a rising heartbeat. I pressed my palms to the cold stone floor, and for the first time it didn't fight me. The temple responded. Faint lines of silver light flaring along the cracks, moving outward like veins awakening after centuries of sleep. Caelan's breath caught. You're awakening it. I don't know how. You don't need to. The light grew stronger, the symbols pulsing with life. I could feel the stories written into them. Fragments of memory, power, pain. Visions flickered through my mind. A woman standing where I was, flames blooming from her hands. A circle of warriors kneeling in reverence. A child born beneath the glow of fire and moon. And then, a scream, a city burning. The same symbols carved into walls now turning to ash. I gasped and pulled my hands back. The light dimmed instantly, leaving the chamber trembling in silence. Caelan pushed himself to his feet, crossing the space between us in 2 long strides. What did you see? The end, I whispered. And the beginning. All at once. He crouched beside me, his hand hovering near mine. Not touching, but close enough that I felt the heat. It wasn't the end, Lyra. It was a warning. For what? For what comes next. I lifted my gaze to his. The firelight made his eyes look gold for a heartbeat. Not human, not wolf. Something older. What comes next? He looked toward the temple's entrance, where the mist was gathering again. Thicker now, curling like smoke from a distant fire. His jaw tightened. The one who started it all, he said. The one they still follow. The one who killed the Flameborn and wears their ashes as a crown. The words made the air colder. I didn't know his name yet, but I could feel his shadow pressing at the edges of my thoughts. Caelan turned back to me, and for the first time since the night we met, his calm cracked. He knows you're alive. My blood ran cold. How? Because the fire called out, he said quietly. And he heard it. Outside, thunder rolled again, but not from the sky. From the earth itself, deep and resonant, as if something buried was waking. The temple's walls shuddered. Dust fell from the ceiling. The mist at the entrance began to move, not drifting, but advancing, alive. Caelan drew his blade, his voice sharp and steady again. He's found us. I rose, the silver glow already flaring through my veins. Then let him come. He looked at me once, the faintest ghost of a smile on his lips, and said, "That's what he's afraid of." The fire surged in my chest, and the temple lit with silver and gold, our shadows stretching high across the walls like the ghosts of gods returning home. The night outside howled, and the world trembled on the edge of war. The temple shuddered before the darkness came. It didn't arrive like night. It arrived like intent. The air thickened, sound folded in on itself, and the mist outside stopped drifting and began to move with purpose. Every flicker of the fire bent inward, shrinking away from the unseen thing pressing at the temple's edge. Caelan stood between me and the entrance, sword in hand, breath measured. The veins of gold and silver light that had come alive on the walls were dimming, swallowed by something heavier, hungrier. "What is that?" I whispered. He didn't turn. "The reason they fear your fire." The first sound was a voice. Low, patient, and ancient enough to make the stone tremble when it spoke. "You've learned to wake it again." The words didn't echo. They breathed through the cracks of the temple, curling around my spine until I could feel them vibrate in my teeth. Caelan's stance tightened. "Stay behind me," he murmured. But the voice wasn't speaking to him. It was speaking to me. "Child of flame," it said again. "I burned your world once. Do you know why it still remembers me?" The mist began to take form, coiling like smoke, folding itself into a silhouette that wasn't flesh, but carried the outline of one. Its eyes opened last, two pits of red-gold fire that devoured the light around them. I had seen monsters before, but this wasn't a beast. It was the idea of power that had forgotten how to die. Caelan raised his sword, the metal catching what little firelight was left. "Malakar," he said quietly. "You should have stayed buried." The name hit the air like a spark to oil. The creature's smile carved through the mist, cruel and amused. "You still use the name they gave me, the one the cowards whispered when they couldn't kill me." His voice moved like smoke through water. Every syllable felt close, too close, as though it was being whispered against my ear. He took a step forward, and the mist obeyed, swirling into the shape of a man in black armor that looked forged from shadow itself. When his boots touched the temple floor, the ancient sigils underfoot dimmed completely, surrendering to him. "Don't move," Caelan warned me again, but I was already trembling, not from fear, but recognition. The fire inside my chest burned hotter, wild and restless. It knew him. The same way blood knows fire, the same way guilt knows its maker. Malakar turned his gaze on me fully, and I could feel the air thin between us. "You've been dreaming of me," he said. "Every night your power tried to wake, it called my name." "I never knew your name," I whispered. "You did," he replied, stepping closer. "You simply forgot, because forgetting was easier than remembering what you are." Caelan's sword flashed, cutting through the dark. The blade met the figure, but instead of blood, The steel passed through smoke that twisted and reformed, laughing. "Still loyal to ghosts, Wraith?" Malakar hissed. "Tell me, how many lifetimes will you waste guarding a dying spark?" Caelan struck again, harder, faster. This time his blade carved through the air with silver light, and the creature faltered. The sound that followed wasn't pain. It was interest. "Ah," Malakar murmured. "So the wolf remembers the bond." Caelan's jaw clenched. "I remember the oath." I looked between them, heart racing. "What bond? What oath?" Malakar's smile widened. "He didn't tell you then." "Of course not. He wouldn't want the flame to know who forged her chains." "Enough," Caelan barked. But the shadow didn't stop. It drifted closer, and the temperature dropped until frost crept over the edges of the stone floor. "He is bound to your bloodline," Malakar said. "A protector by design, a prisoner by duty. His pack swore to serve the first Flameborn. Me." I froze. "You?" His grin deepened and the firelight dimmed around it. "Yes, little one. Before they called me a monster, they called me God." The word hit something inside me, something deep and buried. The pulse beneath my ribs roared awake. The silver fire inside me flared so violently that the ground cracked beneath my feet. Malakar tilted his head, watching. "There she is." The flames burst from my palms, silver and wild, licking at the air between us. They didn't burn me anymore. They felt like breath, like truth. Caelan moved to stand beside me, not in front. "Careful," he said softly. "I'm done being careful." Malakar's eyes glowed brighter. "Good. Then stop pretending to be afraid." He lifted a hand, and the shadows surged forward, crashing into the fire like a wave meeting the sun. The collision tore the air apart. The temple shook, pillars cracking, dust raining from the ceiling. My knees buckled, but Caelan caught me, his arm steady even as the ground trembled beneath us. "Focus," he shouted over the roar. "Don't fight the fire. Guide it." "I don't know how." "You do," he said. "You've always known." I closed my eyes, the storm of power tearing through me. Cold shadow and silver heat colliding until the world blurred. The whispers came back, louder this time, the same ancient chant from the grove. "Child of flame, choice or ruin." I chose. The fire obeyed. It poured out of me in a single burst, not as destruction, but as light. The shadows retreated, hissing, recoiling into the cracks of the temple. For a heartbeat, Malakar staggered, his form flickering between smoke and flesh. His voice was softer now, almost admiring. "So it's true. The fire has chosen again." Then his expression hardened. "But it chose too late." The walls screamed. I swear they screamed. The temple began to collapse, stone crumbling, light twisting. Caelan grabbed my wrist and pulled me backward toward the arched exit. The heat behind us was unbearable, the fire turning white-hot as Malakar's laughter chased us through the ruin. "Run!" Caelan shouted. We dove through the doorway just as the ceiling caved in. The world exploded in light and stone and smoke. We hit the ground outside hard. The shock stole my breath, but the sky above was still there, blood red, choked with clouds. The forest trembled around us, the air filled with ash. For a long time I couldn't move. I just lay there, staring at the ruins glowing in the distance. The temple, the sanctuary of the old gods, was gone. Caelan knelt beside me, breath ragged, dirt streaked across his jaw. "Are you hurt?" I shook my head, though everything inside me burned. What was he?" He looked at the ruins, his expression grim. "Once he was the first Flameborn. Now, he's what happens when power forgets mercy." I stared at him, heart still pounding. He said you served him. I did, Caelan said quietly. We all did, before he became the darkness you just saw. Before I broke the bond, and now, he met my gaze. Now he'll come for both of us. The fire inside me pulsed once, faint but defiant. Then we make him regret it. Caelan's mouth curved. Not a smile, but something close. You sound like your bloodline. I rose slowly, the silver light flickering under my skin again, steady this time, no longer trembling. Behind us, the ruins still burned, and above them, the mist curled into the shape of wings before dissolving into the night. For the first time, I understood what the prophecy meant. The world wasn't ending, it was remembering, and the flame that had once been hunted was no longer running. It was ready to fight. The moon bled that night, not with color, with memory. It rose through the smoke like an open wound, red and swollen, spilling its light across the ruined forest. Every leaf, every shard of broken stone, every drop of blood shimmered beneath it, alive with the reminder that endings never come quietly. The ruins of the temple still smoldered behind us, breathing out ribbons of silver flame that refused to die. The air reeked of ash and storm, of power stretched too far. My skin glowed faintly, the silver lines beneath it now steady, pulsing like a second heartbeat. I could still feel him, Malakar. His presence lingered in the air, heavy, deliberate. He wasn't gone. He was gathering. Caelan stood a few steps ahead, his sword drawn, face painted with blood and shadow. The wind caught the edges of his torn cloak, snapping it against the silence. He looked like something sculpted by the gods, weary, scarred, unbroken. I wanted to believe that was enough. It wasn't. He'll come when the moon reaches its peak, Caelan said quietly, eyes fixed on the horizon. He always does. The blood moon is his tether. It's where his curse began. I swallowed hard. Then that's where it ends. He turned, and for the first time since I'd met him, there was something close to fear in his eyes. Endings come with cost, Lyra. You've barely learned to wield the fire. If you face him now, I have to. He exhaled, the sound somewhere between a sigh and a vow. Then I stay with you. The words hit deeper than they should have. I wanted to tell him not to, that if he stayed, he'd burn too. But the way he looked at me, steady, unflinching, as if he'd already made peace with the fire, left no room for argument. So I nodded. Then we finished this together. We climbed until the trees thinned into stone and wind. The mountain loomed above, a jagged crown of black rock, its peak shrouded in red mist. The old world had built its altars here, where storms touched the earth, where gods were loud enough to hear their own names. The higher we went, the louder the world became. The wind howled through the cliffs, carrying voices I couldn't understand. They weren't human. They weren't kind, but they were familiar. Flame child, burn or be broken. When we reached the summit, the sky was burning. Clouds rolled in slow, heavy spirals, circling the blood moon like smoke around an open flame. The air was thick enough to taste iron, salt, memory. Caelan stopped beside me. This is where he fell, he said softly, where they betrayed him, and where he began again. I stared at the ground beneath us. The rock wasn't stone anymore. It was glass, melted long ago by something too powerful to contain. By him, and then before I could speak, the world darkened. It wasn't the clouds. It was him. Malakar rose from the mist below like a tide of shadow and flame, his form coalescing into something human, only because it pleased him to mock the shape of life. His armor gleamed with liquid night. The cracks that laced his body burned from within, veins of molten gold and red. His voice rolled across the mountaintop like thunder. "You've come to finish what you don't understand." Caelan lifted his sword, the silver runes along its edge blazing to life. "We've come to end what you started." Malakar's eyes found me. "End it?" His tone curved into amusement. "Little flame, I made you. Every flicker inside you, every spark that has ever burned your skin. It belongs to me. I don't belong to anyone." He laughed, and the sound broke the clouds apart. "You think defiance makes you free? You think this wolf can save you? You are made of my fire, my curse. You are my echo." The silver beneath my skin flared, hot and wild. "Then I'll make the echo scream." The first wave came fast, shadows ripping through the air, claws and flame intertwined. Caelan met them head-on, his blades singing through the dark, each strike carving streaks of light into the smoke. I joined him, the fire rising from my hands, swirling into ribbons that lashed at the night. We fought like twin storms, his fury sharp and controlled, mine reckless and wild. The mountains shuddered beneath us. The air burned. The shadows screamed. Malakar's laughter never faltered. He stepped through the chaos, untouched by it, his voice cutting through the noise. "You fight me with the very thing I gave you. Do you not see the futility?" I hurled a burst of silver flame at him. It hit his chest and dispersed. Not burned, not destroyed, absorbed. The fire vanished into him like breath into lungs. He smiled. "You cannot burn the fire!" Caelan charged, his blade striking true. This time the steel met flesh. Malakar staggered, just slightly, and his eyes snapped toward Caelan, fury rippling across his face. "Wraith," he hissed. "You should have stayed in your grave." Caelan's voice was steady, even through the blood at his lip. "And miss this?" He plunged the blade deeper. Malakar roared, not in pain, but in rage, and threw Caelan aside with a wave of force so violent it cracked the mountain. I screamed as his body struck the rocks, his sword tumbling from his hand. "Caelan!" He didn't rise. The fire inside me screamed louder than my voice. It clawed its way up, desperate, uncontrollable. My skin split with light. The air around me shimmered, bending under the pressure of power unbound. Malakar turned toward me, his grin spreading again. "Yes, that's it, feel it. That is what I wanted. That is what you are." He spread his arms wide, inviting the storm. "Show me what kind of god you'll make." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The fire answered for me. It erupted from me in a single endless pulse, not silver now, but white, pure and merciless. The sky split open. The moon flared crimson. Every stone, every shadow, every echo of the past came alive in that light. Malakar screamed, not in triumph this time, but in something older. Pain, memory, recognition. The fire devoured him. His shape broke apart, scattering into fragments of burning glass that vanished into the wind. His voice was the last to fade, a whisper buried in the roar of flame. "You will remember me, because I am you." And then, silence. The world was smoke and ruin. My knees hit the ground. The light in my skin dimmed, flickering out until I was only flesh again. My hands shook. My breath came shallow, The moon was pale now, no longer bleeding. The mountain had gone still. Caelan, I crawled toward him, every movement agony. He lay near the edge of the cliff, his body half covered in dust and ash. His chest moved, faintly, alive. Relief broke through me so sharp it hurt worse than fear. I pressed my hand to his chest. "You idiot," I whispered. "You weren't supposed to die for me." His eyes fluttered open, heavy with exhaustion. "Did we win?" I smiled through the tears I didn't realize were falling. "I don't know. The world's still here. That's something." He tried to smile back, but it broke into a cough. "Then it's enough." The fire inside me pulsed once, a quiet echo, gentle now, almost warm. It flowed through my fingertips into him, sealing the worst of the wounds. He gasped softly, then steadied. "What are you doing?" he asked. "Giving you a piece of what you've been protecting." His gaze found mine, too tired to hide what it meant. "You'll need it." "I'll have enough," I whispered. "You've given me more than you know." For a long while, we just sat there, two broken things on the edge of a mountain that had forgotten what peace felt like. The wind carried the last embers of the temple away, scattering them into the night. When I finally looked up, the dawn had come. The sky was soft again, streaked with gold instead of blood. The prophecy had been wrong all along. The world didn't end in fire. It remembered through it. I rose, helping Caelan to his feet. His grip was firm, alive. The horizon stretched wide before us. Endless forest, endless sky, endless possibility. "What now?" he asked quietly. I looked at the sun, at the light catching on the ashes drifting from the ruins below. "Now," I said, "we rebuild what they burned." He smiled, small and real. "And if the fire rises again?" I let the glow return, faint silver under my skin, alive, steady, unafraid. "Then I'll rise with it." The wind carried our silence forward. The ashes danced, and somewhere far beyond the horizon the world began again,